Okay. Hello and welcome. I'm so excited for today. If you guys are ready, we are going to be doing not just like a boundaries webinar, but we're actually going to go through and do the workbook exercises together. So, how we're going to set up today is I have a hard copy of the workbook. I know myself, and I know that I have a tendency to move along very quickly and sort of dive right into things. So I'm going to fill out some of the exercises with you guys in real time. In this way, on really important courses that I know a lot of you are really invested in and like doing the work on, and boundaries is such an important component of our lives for healthy functional relationships and for just being a functional member of society. What we're going to do is I'm actually going to go and do the workbook exercises with you. So I'm going to fill them out in the actual workbook. I have my fillable workbook version up. And so we're going to go through it and do it together. And then that way you have the extra support system. And what this also is going to help us do is in between exercises, we're going to be able to do the actual, the Q&A. So we're going to start. A couple things really quickly in terms of announcements before I dive into all of this. First of all, thanks everybody for being here on your Friday. And second of all, we've received a few emails about potentially translating the content into different languages. And so if anybody's interested in like working on a project with a school that would want to translate into Chinese, Mandarin, Hindi, Spanish, somebody's brought up French. We've had a few people in different areas. If anybody's interested, it's not something we're for sure going to do, and we're not sure of the timeline, just to be really clear out of the gates. But it is something that we are sort of just trying to figure out because we're getting a lot of requests. So please email my team at info@personaldevelopmentschool.com if there's something you'd be interested in doing within that. What else can I announce to you? I feel like there's a whole bunch of other exciting things, but they'll come up as we go. I made a bunch of announcements yesterday. If you haven't had a chance to check out yesterday's webinar. So I will just give you guys the sort of setup here. So we're going to go through. I'm going to take you through sorry, let me turn off I don't know if you guys can hear that, but when I get notifications and make loud noises. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you guys through the actual workbook. And then in between every single exercise, I'm going to hold space for a bunch of questions. And also go through and do all the questions that are in here. And hi, everybody. Hi, Lori and Rochelle and Daphne. And thank you guys so much. And hello, Oslam. Oslam, I just saw your question. I thought you meant it was in the Facebook forum. I put a big, long answer the other day if you haven't seen it. And thank you so much for your kind words. And hello, Princess Khan, and Mary Andrea, Natalie, and Jody. Hi, guys. Okay, so let's dive in because this is such an important topic. And basically, I'm going to prioritize the courses in terms of doing the workbook modules that I think are the most important. And if you guys have any feedback as well on the needs workbook modules and the boundaries one, the needs and the emotional mastery and belief reprogramming course that we have, the only reason I didn't prioritize those two is because we had just launched the entire workbook module. So it's like there's an in-depth supportive system there already. But going into next month, I'll do some follow-up webinars on those anyways, just to make sure you have that system in place, not from maybe a workbook perspective, but just from an overall webinar content perspective, because those are such key principles to deeply understand as you jump into your journey inside of the school. So if you haven't already, please make sure you have this either printed off or pulled up on your computer. One other really cool announcement is that we are slowly going to be adding fillable workbooks. So I think a couple of them are up right now. I think for the needs and the emotional mastery and belief reprogramming course, after today, we're going to have the fillable boundaries course up. So you're actually going to have like a fillable version on your computer screen or from your phone or tablet. So you can literally just type into the workbook and then print off and have a hard copy. So my team is slowly going through and updating all of that as well. Okay, so let's start with the first exercise. And I'm going to read through like the purpose, the integration, all this stuff. So exercise number 1 here. Okay, so exercise number 1 is Setting boundaries to end compulsive people pleasing and create authentic connections. I want you to think of this exercise as like your boundary inventory and then working to create changes to any patterns that are not serving the highest expression of yourself when it comes to boundaries specifically. And so the purpose is to get insight into which areas of your life are lacking boundaries or where you're violating your own boundaries on autopilot. And when you define and set these boundaries ahead of time, it will help you to actually have more thriving connections with individuals. So we're going to go through, you're going to check through each of the 7 areas of life in the first exercise, and then write where you think you have boundaries that are violated. And these can be self-boundary violations or other boundary violations. So an example of a self-boundary violation would be, I say yes when I mean no. So I know that I have a boundary. I'm aware that like, no, this doesn't feel good for me, but I do it anyway. So basically at the end point, I am being asked permission. And yet, even though I'm being asked permission, I still say yes. And so it's me violating my own boundary. And other boundary violation is somebody like yells a word at you that's inappropriate and you didn't have a say, you didn't have a chance, or somebody steals something without you knowing, or something, you didn't have a say. And so it's somebody just violating your boundaries and you didn't really get an option or a choice. Okay. So in this chart here, what you're going to see, and I wrote some examples out that I'll take some time to do with you guys. In this chart, just write out what comes to mind. Okay, we're not going to go through and do an example for every single one because it would be like a 9-hour webinar, but I'm just going to give you some clear examples, and I'm going to literally go through this with you. So the point here is to write out your examples and then write beside these examples, is this a self-boundary violation or other boundary violation? And in part 2, we're going to then have updated versions of what we would rather do instead, like how we would actually, what boundaries we would want to have and how we can actually enforce those or communicate about them. Okay, so I'm going to fill this first part out with you. So when we look at this, okay, and you have a thought boundary violation in terms of career. So in case these are unclear, let's do them together. So a thought boundary violation in terms of career could be something like, I don't speak up in meetings. Okay, so take a moment. You're in your career, you're in the flow of things at work, and you don't speak up in your meetings. So you have these thoughts or opinions, and you repress them. So that would be a really good example of a thought boundary violation from self. And other boundary violation in career could be something like, you do speak up in meetings, but you have somebody who's constantly shooting your ideas down. Okay, so fill out, and they do so in a negative, very disrespectful manner, right? So let's say boss is shooting ideas down. Okay, so I hope this makes sense so far. So let's look at financial. Maybe you have financial investing opinions and you don't share those with others. Okay, because you think, oh, no, my thoughts and opinions won't be valued here. Or, what if I say the wrong thing? And you have this urge to speak up and you want to share and you want to participate in the conversation, but you actively repress yourself in this area. Okay, so that would be an example of that. I'm not going to go through and do self and other for every single one. Mental, I'm going to go through a few different areas of life though. Mental, the one I put down is, it's really simple. Don't share personal opinions. Okay, and there's a lot of individuals who will shy away from actually communicating their personal opinions and don't want to speak up and share personal ideas or concepts or beliefs they have because out of fear of conflict, which can be self-boundary violation. Okay, other, somebody shoots down, somebody's really negative or rude towards your thoughts, your opinions, your beliefs, the mental faculties of you as a human being. Okay, in a way that feels inappropriate. Now, keep in mind, somebody can be not rude to you in this area of your life. Somebody can be, or somebody could be rude and it could not bother you. And you could go, oh, that's just a them problem and they're projecting onto me and it's irrelevant. And in that case, it wouldn't necessarily qualify as a boundary violation. The boundary violations are when we feel like something has been crossed that violates our personal territory or sense of self. Okay. Emotional boundaries. Maybe you think too much about caretaking others or others' emotional problems. In that case, clearly a self-boundary violation. Okay? Maybe in physical, you are constantly replaying times when people violated your physical space. Okay, so somebody did something, you felt like there were two in your physical space, something like that, and you constantly go back and think about it and ruminate without either communicating or doing something about it. And in that case, you're just infiltrating your own emotional territory with these ideas of physical things that happened that are just clogging your clarity, your peace, all these different things. So we're just trying to notice in this part, like in all these different areas, things that show up. Okay. Spiritual is pretty self-explanatory. It could be something like not sharing your spiritual opinions and thoughts about things, having somebody be really rude or inconsiderate to your spiritual thoughts and opinions you have, or your religious thoughts and opinions you have. And then relationship as well could be, you're always thinking about Bob leaving you. You're always thinking about what Bob's doing. You're always thinking about, and I'll put that in here, always thinking about Bob leaving, or what he's doing, or and you're giving all of your thought energy to Bob instead of being here in your own business doing your own life. Okay, so these are some examples here. I'm going to do one of a couple more in each of these different columns so you see, and hopefully I'm going slowly enough where you're getting the time in here together to reflect and do all of this. So in terms of emotional boundaries, and in your career. Maybe you feel guilty for Sally, who is struggling at work, so you take on her work, or maybe you find yourself always giving your emotional energy to her in the workplace, always listening to her fears and her complaining about the boss and about the coworkers, and so you're taking on her emotional burdens in the workplace, finding yourself in sort of a bind and having difficulty saying no. Or maybe Sally comes and she sits at your desk and she just talks to you nonstop and she doesn't ask you, hey, do you have a moment to communicate? And she just unloads onto you all the time. And that could be an other boundary violation, but then these are the places we have to be able to practice speaking up and making changes. Okay. And this is a really common thing I've seen from many different people. So in terms of emotions and finances, right? A really clear example would be you find yourself taking on the emotional load of somebody around you, worrying about them, and then maybe lending all of your money because you're in a space where you're like, what if they're not okay? What if, and so you're feeling, and then you violate yourself because of those two areas in your life coming together. Okay. So we'll just say, lend all of your money. And I mean, obviously somebody's probably not going to lend like the very last cent in their bank account and then not be able to pay their rent or things like this. But like we're trying to get these concepts and ideas of where you might violate your financial boundaries because of like emotional burdens that you're taking on and where these things tend to coalesce. Okay. Mental, this is really simple, right? You're incessantly taking on others' feelings. Okay, so you guys are getting like the idea here very clearly, probably. Okay, and then if we just look at different examples, I won't go through every single column, but let's just look at physical. A really good physical boundaries, like an emotional boundary violation in the physical area of life, is if you find yourself feeling afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, so you let physical space be taken up. Like it doesn't, we're not talking sexual, we're not saying you have sex when you don't want to have sex or something like that. We're saying physical affection. Maybe you're not ready to like hold hands with somebody in a relationship. Maybe you're not ready to be super affectionate or affectionate in public, but you're afraid of saying no. And so you're afraid because you're specifically taking on their emotions. And so you allow things to physically progress when you feel uncomfortable. Okay. And I'm just sharing like common things that I've seen many times over the years for different individuals. Okay. So physical boundaries, this should be getting quite self-explanatory at this point. Let's say somebody violates your physical space at work. Okay. Maybe they put all of their belongings onto your desk, and that could be another boundary violation. Okay. So put belongings onto your desk, and you're like, hey, like this is my desk. Put your stuff on your desk over there. And they don't ask or things like that. Um, let's say in terms of material boundaries in career, it could be somebody borrows your stapler and never gives it back, right? So like these little tiny things, and some of these things you might be like, these need to be discussions. Other things you might be like, it doesn't really bother me and it's not that significant. But the point is that you have to take the inventory and do the work and look. And it should feel normal to be able to say to Bob, hey, like you borrowed my stapler last week. I really need it back. Like I paid out of pocket for that stapler. I would like it back, please. Those are my belongings. Like you should feel like it's okay and comfortable to have those conversations. And this is why, if we look at part two, we'll see that there are way you're going to have like a replacement boundary, and in terms of what you want to say, what you want to take place in these specific scenarios that you've just listed out. And then we're going to do exposure response work around it, where you're actually going to pick the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest things, and then actually start exposing yourself to communicating them, sharing them, working through them. Okay. And just in terms of a time boundary here, if we look at our time chart, and I'm trying to fill this out with you on the computer so that I'm pacing myself in my timing so you guys have a chance to actually write these things out as well. But if we look at, I'll just do one in terms of time. So a time boundary violation is you giving your time, or somebody taking your time, or putting you in a bind where you like kind of have to say yes without your say would be another violation, or you saying yes to things when you really mean no. So let's just say time boundaries in career. Maybe you're helping somebody else build their career when you're already falling behind in your stuff. And it might not be in your career stuff, it could be in your family stuff, right? It could be that you want to spend more time with family and you feel like you're never getting enough time with your kids, and then you find yourself helping somebody else build their career in the career area of life, or helping somebody manage their money in the money area of life, or helping somebody with their mental or emotional challenges in those areas of life. So you're seeing that you're violating your own time boundaries in those areas. And then sexual boundaries obviously are quite self-explanatory from the perspective of time. If there's a sexual violation in the career, in the workplace, if it's with somebody in the financial area of your life, an accountant, if somebody is violating in any sexual way, touching inappropriately, anything like that, that is pretty self-explanatory as well. So, and obviously, if that's the case, like you don't just do boundaries work, like you report somebody if they're violating boundaries inappropriately. That goes without saying. So that's our first part. Okay, so I'm going to pause, take some questions, and then we're going to go into actually doing some cognitive reframes. And then after we do the cognitive reframes around the actual exercise, we will go and do some more questions. Okay, so let's see here. So what do we have? Okay, so first questions. Hi, Mary Andrea. Oh, thank you so much. So my boyfriend asked for some space on Tuesday. He didn't say how much space. And welcome, by the way. You said you're new here, so welcome, welcome. He asked for space on Tuesday. He didn't say how much space or has come back. There's a lot of volatility because of my fears, and I feel like he is DA. I have the worst boundary setting meter. I used to put boundaries for everything in an aggressive manner, control everything. Then I realized being aggressive is not how I want to be. Good for you. And that's a profound realization to have, because aggression usually is born of fear, right? So if we're aggressive, we're usually just afraid, but we don't want to let ourselves give into that fear. And so we come out strong, and it's a coping mechanism, right? Because of past pain when we felt defenseless or helpless a lot of the time. So it's good to recognize that, the innocence in that, and to make those amends in relationship to self. I used to put boundaries for everything in an aggressive manner. Then I realized this is not how I want to be. So I started not speaking up and shutting my mouth. Now I feel like I lost my spice and I want to set boundaries. So this is the plan, right? We always want to come back to equilibrium. And there isn't really much in the human experience that doesn't show up as the best version of itself when it's brought into balance. And when we have balance, we get the ability to choose relative to the appropriateness in a situation. If we never have boundaries, we're probably not going to be great at setting them in the moment. If we always have too strong of boundaries, we're not going to have the opportunity to like sit back and surrender and go with the flow of things, which can be most beneficial at times. And so we always want to have this balance here. So I love that you brought that up. It's a beautiful share. And this is exactly what we're going to be going into and sort of weeding through in here today. And so this is, and what you can do if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, how do I bring that balance into my boundary setting? As we go through these next sets of exercises, we're going to do this exposure response work. So you're going to have your cognitive reframes and then you're going to pick your lowest hanging fruit. What are the simplest boundaries I can start setting? Practice exposing yourself so that you feel empowered and you feel like over time it's become easy to speak up in the moment and set those boundaries. And then you can really branch out to the more challenging figures in your life and the more challenging boundaries that you might want to set. And so this is how that's going to work. Hello, Jody. How are you? How can you tell in real time whether someone, specifically FA, actually agrees with you and intends to do what they say or are avoiding conflict and people pleasing? And thank you. Okay, so it's a great question. At the end of the day, we can't we're not necessarily going to be able to read minds, right? So and I totally see you're saying like, how can I tell what's actually going on? And so the only thing that really you can do that's reasonable is say, hey, I hear that you're agreeing to this. I really appreciate this. I just want to make sure that that's your truth as well. Have you taken yourself into consideration? Does that work for you? Do you see yourself being able to stick to this? And if not, what tweaks would you make so I can know ahead of time and we can make effective compromises now so that we avoid potential obstacles later? And that's just what I would say to help navigate that. But just remember, it's not your job if somebody agrees to then undo their people pleasing and set boundaries for them. It's your job to just communicate if that's your need to know with certainty what's happening. It's your job to communicate and ask those questions and have those conversations as thoroughly as possible so that you get your need met, but you're not necessarily going to be able to control everything and the entire dynamic and situation. It's an excellent question though. So Daphne says, hello, Daphne. I would like to know what does consistency look like to a DA for text messages? How do I find the balance between too much or too little? To reprogram my core wounds. I would like guidance to reprogram my core wounds. Okay, so I'm going to try to stay on track for the topic for today in the webinar. We'll definitely do a long form version. It's a great question, but just I'll give you a very high level answer for now. And then we'll do we're going to do going into next month. We might have one this month, an open attachment style webinar. And emotional mastery and belief reprogramming are things we're going to touch back along as well. So I would say in terms of the dismissive avoidance and text messages, every other day, it really depends on what stage you're in of the relationship. If it's the dating phase, every 3 or 4 days, and then as you progress in it, every other day, and then as you really get close to honeymoon phase and more commitment, then it's good to touch base every day, maybe once in the morning, once in the evening, or just once a day at some point. That might be there, but you want to have that conversation with that person. That's going to be the most important thing. And just say hey, it's so interesting to me because I'm learning about attachment styles and I'm recognizing people have different needs for communication. And how often would you prefer to talk to somebody that you're in a dynamic with that's romantic? And just have that conversation, get that stuff out of the way in advance, and it'll make your life so much easier. So great question. And Daphne as well, we have an in-depth, if you search in the webinar library, emotional mastery and belief reprogramming, I go through a whole bunch of live examples. There's a live example webinar. I'm going to do more live example webinars, and it touches on all of this in so much detail in terms of reprogramming. And yesterday, quite a few questions came up around that as well, in terms of the different paths or avenues you can take if you find yourself stuck on something. And to make sure you're checking in with your behaviors so that your behaviors aren't discounting your thought and belief work, to make sure you start more general and get more specific over time, or look outside of you for other examples to then pull inside of you so that you're gaining that momentum. So great questions. And hi, CJ, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Welcome. It's great to see you in here today. Hello, Lori. Good to see you. Okay, Francis. Hello, Francis. Hi everyone, my dad passed away Monday I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you, Thais, for your idea of using the grief work and the breakup course. It really helped me process through things in advance and after, and I'm solid now. Wow, age 91. I'm so happy to hear that. So, Francis, the grief, the breakup course is actually based on a grief process for like literally dealing with grief. And we can make like the post traumatic growth course is going to have a lot of that as well. That'll be out this month in a lot of detail. It's going to be a pretty intensive course, a little bit longer than usual. But so hopefully that's not too, I did all this research when we started the school about like 3 hours should be the max course for people and have more of them instead of really long ones. But this one's just so important to do thoroughly. And that should help as well. But I'm so sorry to hear that. But I'm also so happy to hear that you're using the tools and you feel empowered to move through things. And it's the deepest work I've ever found around how to process grief. And I've done a lot of researching around a lot of different things. So thank you. And hello, Michelle. Hello, Ben. Thank you guys so much. And happy you guys are here today. Okay, so I hope this is making sense so far. So let's go into the second part of this exercise and we'll go through some different reframes, okay? And I hope you've had a chance to, and feel free to take the time, like as we're speaking and going through questions, to really reflect and see what comes up for you in terms of these different boundary violations you see. And you can think of this as being like a giant boundary inventory of all of the things that can be violated from time to time and all the changes that you want to make. And so you're taking a full boundary inventory, and then you're taking a full inventory of like what shifts you want to create, and then it's the repetition of them to program them in so that you start seeing the desired results. Okay, so let's just look at a couple potential reframes. So let's say we have you don't speak up in meetings. So like these are, it should be pretty straightforward at this point, right? I don't speak up in meetings. Okay, what do I want in terms of in my career area of my life and my thought boundaries? I would like to practice speaking up in meetings once a week until I feel that it's normal to express my feelings, or sorry, my thoughts and opinions. Okay, so you're having this sort of concept or idea here where like this is the goal that I would like to have in terms of my boundaries, and here's sort of the strategy that's encompassed within that, like what I can do to reach that point. Okay, and there's more space below this exercise on page 5 to actually go through and break these things down into chunks and add strategies and journal these things out further, right? So if you're looking at that, the example would be maybe you go to page 5 and you say, okay, career, and if this is what I'm working on out of my boundaries chart first and foremost, then maybe in the career area of my life, I practice speaking up in the meetings with the people I feel most comfortable with first. Okay, so maybe my meeting that I have on Monday mornings with 4 people, and in that meeting with the 4 people, I know and trust 2 of them really well. The other 2 I know fairly well and I feel relatively comfortable with, so I'm going to speak up a little bit more there first. And then your next set of strategies could be, you know, once I feel like I've mastered that, then I'm going to expand into the meeting with 8 people, and then I'm going to speak up once a week there until I feel more and so basically you're creating these incremental steps of exposure to being able to do this so that you can transition through this process as quickly as possible. Okay, and you could even add in there I'm going to type this out so that I'm like timing myself and not going too fast so that you guys have a chance to do this as well. But I practice speaking up in the meeting with 4 people, then 8 people, okay? And then maybe you practice visualization, right? Because remember, your brain likes to be familiar. So maybe you practice visualizing yourself speaking up and what that looks like, and then you try to lace in positive feelings with it. Like, I feel courageous, I feel empowered when I visualize myself speaking up with everybody and participating and sharing my ideas and thoughts, okay? So you go through, you would do this for all of the boundaries specifically that you want to focus on the most, okay? Now, my advice to you as well would be to pick 1 or 2 major commitments you can make every week and stay on top of them so that these can be little systems that you put into your life. The more we systemize things, or make things systematic. I hope that those are both proper expressions of grammar. The more we do that over time, the easier it becomes, because our subconscious mind is like, okay, this is habitual, and this becomes part of our new identity. When we continue to repeat this over time, feel good about it, and lace those thoughts and feelings together to have that outcome or output. Okay. And let's do one more example in this exercise in terms of a reframe. So um, let's say in terms of your material boundaries, okay? And let's say in your workplace, somebody borrows your stapler. I guess, like, it's everybody's probably working from home right now, but let's say somebody borrows your stapler or your documents or whatever it might be, and they don't give them back. Maybe you just have a system in place where you say, I commit to asking for my belongings back each and every time someone borrows them. And then when you look at the strategy part of this exercise at the top of page 5, you might just say, okay, so for career and materials, okay, you might say, I will write out ahead of time how I will phrase this to make it easier on myself. Okay, so you're supporting yourself in the process. So for example, maybe you have like a tagline that you memorize where somebody borrows something and you say, hey, no problem, but I notice sometimes in the office I don't get my stuff back, so please make sure you return it. And you just have something in the back of your mind that's preparing you ahead of time so that you set yourself up for success. Okay, and you're just being conscious and intentional. And it would be completely okay to be going through this experience and to go through this process and to trip up on your words and to not say it perfectly sometimes or forget to say it. And that's all completely okay. Back to the drawing board, try again the next time. And just as long as you are taking little steps forward, you're going to look back guaranteed at some point in your life and be like, wow, I'm a different person in this area when it comes to boundaries, because I committed to just taking incremental steps forward, constantly building momentum, not, beating myself up if there was a problem or a challenge, and I kept going along and growing and expanding. And so that is the goal, and that's absolutely the way that I would try to approach this entire dynamic and exercise. So is this all making sense so far? Is this like crystal clear? I'm going to come back in here and answer some questions for another like 10 or so minutes, so that you guys can have the opportunity to like really make sure everything is clarified. Okay, so let's see in here. What do I have? Okay, my best friend was triggered by something, and due to weak communication, we have separated for over a year because she said she needed space. When I tried to respect her boundary, let me just see. Hold on, my cursor jumped a little bit here. So funny because my cursor like will look like the thing on the side, I guess not the cursor, but the sidebar. It looks like it's like large because I guess there's only a few questions at the beginning, and then when I move it, it like shrinks. And then I see how many questions are really there. Okay, so Minerva continues and says, when I tried to respect her boundary but checked in with brief notes, cards, and small gifts, the responses grew less and less inclined towards repair and reconciliation, which is my heartfelt goal to this day. Is not agreeing to process with someone after a period of no contact a boundary that needs to be honored, or is there a way to respect my needs to communicate? So it's a great question. What you want to be able to do is you sort of have to be able to communicate what your needs are in order to know if a boundary was crossed or not. Okay, so it can be, because it almost has to fall into the category of self-boundary violation by default if there's a lack of expressing what you need in a scenario. So for example, if you said to her, hey, like I really want closure from the friendship, or I really want to process like the end of the friendship if you don't find yourself open and willing and able to participate, and then there's a violation, I mean, at that point, if the person's leaving the relationship dynamic, then you're going to have to just do the grief processing or the work around the actual ending of the relationship so that you don't violate your own boundaries. But the absence of communicating what you need, it's so sweet that you're like sending gifts and notes and things like that and like trying to maintain the friendship. But for all you know, she might be like, oh, she's trying to have a friendship again, and she doesn't know what you're needing, what you're expecting, what that would look like from your perspective personally. And so the absence of that doesn't give you an opportunity to really see what the potential outcome could be. So by default, it kind of falls into the self-boundary violation. So I highly suggest writing out what you need and then communicating that. And then depending on her response, you know what to do next. So great question. Let's see. Okay, so Princess Khan. Hi, Sarah and Tiffany and Anna. Oh, I missed a couple things. Okay, so, and Michelle, hello. And Shanna and Natalie, hi guys. And Jennifer. INFJ, FA, HSP, empath, I need boundaries like I need oxygen. I understand. Okay, so beautiful, beautiful. You've got like all the combinations to be naturally boundaryless. So this is like very, very important work. And be patient with yourself in the journey and process. Okay, so Tiffany says, how do you overcome feeling guilty when setting the boundaries? Okay, exciting stuff. So I'm going to answer a couple more questions, but this is, so I just want you guys to see what we've done so far so it's super clear. So we went through, we did some examples. I should probably write in like black pen instead of pencil. Did some examples of chart 1, okay, filled them out together. Did a couple examples of cognitive reframes. I didn't write them on here, but I typed them up. So cognitive reframes on chart 2. So what cognitive reframes in terms of how you're going to set boundaries, but they're really like actionable reframes, if anything. So in exercise 1, chart 2, page 4, go through those and expand these out in detail. And then page 5 here that we were talking about, this is just your strategies piece. So this is your like actually putting out, like I'll speak up in this meeting with 4 people and then this meeting in 8 people and I'll speak up about this and this and I'll visualize myself speaking up. And these are creating all of the support systems for yourself to set yourself up for success. And just journaling out on this page, and obviously you can expand it further into line paper, just journaling out all of the ideas you have that can set yourself up for success. And then Tiffany, when we go into exercise 2 on page 6, this is going to be the answer to your question. So it's like, it's noticing what fears you have when you set boundaries. And in your case, it's going to be fear with guilt, fear because of fear of guilt. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to save the answer to your question so we can actually do a long form example in just a moment. And that will help you a lot. Okay, so hi, Sarah. How are you? Okay, hello, Gretchen. So Princess Khan's question is how to deal with others' boundaries as a hypervigilant person. Sometimes we can ask if we're right, but other times we can tell a boundary is being placed, such as needing space or wanting to end a conversation. If we can't ask, how do we respect what boundary our hypervigilance has picked up on, or are we storytelling? I've been communicating with my ex and it's helping to practice this. It's been helping to practice this. We seemed offended. We seemed offended by what I said and cut the convo. I think you meant he seemed offended by what I said and cut the convo short. So I later just decided to ask this time, and I was right. He was offended. Excellent. In this instance, I could ask and apologize, but in other instances where he's giving one-word answers and sometimes seems to want the conversation to end, I pushed talking until he stopped answering. Is it unhealthy to read these cues of others to respect their boundaries? Yeah, okay, really good question. To respect their boundaries that they can't express but show, and how to make sure you're still connecting to your own boundaries and needs and feelings. Excellent question. Okay, so it's really interesting. We can't be responsible for other people's boundaries, but we can absolutely, and I highly recommend, especially as we're moving to like more of a state of mastery of this information, I would definitely recommend to have those conversations. If somebody seems offended, ask, hey, I noticed that like you started to shut down a few moments ago when I said this thing. I want to make sure that we're clear and it wasn't taken out of context. Did I say anything that offended you? What came up for you when I communicated that? Is there anything you want to share with me? Open the dialogue, okay? Very powerful things to do in all of our relationships. Friendships, family members, romantic relationships, everywhere. Have the conversation. Because the alternative is if you picked up on something. Now, your job isn't to do that for people. Your job is if you've picked up on something and noticed it as a hypervigilant person, you either have to do the story work or the communication work because you're going to carry it, right? It's not going to just, or you repress it into your subconscious, and then it becomes a fear later, and then you're acting, worrying that you might have